Well, for more on FIFA's gender inequity and the Women's World Cup, I'm joined by Mike Bako, live from New York. He's a sports editor at DailyNational.com. Welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. Always great to be with you.
So give us some background here. Who are the key teams to watch in this year's Women's World Cup?
Well, obviously the number one team that you have to look at, the number one team in the world and the defending champion, the U.S. team. One of the things that's great about them is that they're able to play really any style. They could score goals with the best of them, but they could also play a defensive type of game. You look at the team that they beat in the last Women's World Cup, Japan. They have a team and a roster built around some of those same players. They don't necessarily have the same influx of stars that the U.S. has been able to regenerate their roster with. So even though Japan is in the contention for the top teams, I don't really see them repeating or going as far as they did in their previous go-around. And then you also have to look at some teams that have good offenses like Australia. You look at the host country like France, who's really put a lot of infrastructure and effort. We heard in some of that story previously about just having fields, having infrastructure, building an internal system to foster the growth of the sport. They've really been able to do that. So I really look at them as a potential force in this World Cup this year. And then we have other teams like Sweden and England. So I think it's going to be a well-rounded World Cup, but I don't really think we're going to see too many upsets, or as you get into the field of 16 and the semifinals, I think we will be seeing most of those female powerhouses from those nations that I just mentioned.
Now, as we know, the American team is defending their title. They've already won 3 times before, but their paychecks don't seem to reflect that, especially compared to the U.S. men's team. Where does this push for equal pay for the American women's team stand?
Well, it's an ongoing effort. They filed a federal lawsuit back in March demanding equal pay, gender inequality, and you could just see it in their paychecks, to be quite honest with you. When the U.S. team, the men's national team, made it to the round of 16, they were afforded bonuses from FIFA in the range of $9 million. When the U.S. women's team won the World Cup, they only got bonuses of $2 million. You see it from the top down. You see it from when they win the World Cup to even in the friendly matches, from the bonuses that the federations are paying them. The men are getting almost double the amount of money that the female players are getting for winning comparable friendly matches. So when you're looking just at the stark numbers, at the paycheck, there is a huge gender equality. It's something that's on the minds of so many of the women players. You hear it from very vocal players like Hope Solo. Alex Morgan has come out in favor of this. And then if you even take a step back on a global scale, from the Norway side of things, Ada Hegerberg is probably the best player in the entire world from a female perspective, and she's sitting out all international competition until there's equality in pay on the Norway side of things.
Mike, one of the metrics that people use to compare the two is viewership and sponsorship. How do the expectations differ compared to the Men's World Cup last year?
Well, think about this. When the U.S. beat Japan 4 years ago, 25 million U.S. viewers watched that game. The most viewed soccer game in the entire history of U.S. Viewing from a Nielsen standpoint. And again, we go back to that bonus pool, $2 million. So unfortunately, the women's game just does not match up in terms of what they are being paid. When you look at it from a sponsorship standpoint, there are big brands that are focusing on the U.S. team. Certainly the stars are there. The stars are going to be in force in this little microcosm of time. If you're looking at the next month or so, it's really about building that partnership, building those sponsorships to carry on not just during World Cup time, but beyond. How can sponsors grow the female athletes beyond just during World Cup time? They haven't really done a great job on the U.S., on the men's side of things either. When we still think about global superstars, we're thinking about the European players, and we're talking about players from the Premier League and places like that. So whether the women are able to do it or the men are able to do it, from a U.S. national team standpoint, from both sides, they both struggle with it.
Now, Mike, I do want to look at also global expansion. We did see that this week FIFA and the French Development Agency pledged to promote women's football in Africa. How do you rate FIFA President Gianni Infantino's, not just his performance in promoting women in the sport, but promoting the sport globally?
Well, he really tried to push for that 48-team World Cup. He's not going to be able to do it for the next go-around on the U.S. side of things. So that was a bit of a black eye for him, more of an embarrassment than anything else. He's certainly trying to make up for some of the misdeeds, a lot of misdeeds from his predecessor, Sepp Blatter. Platini also involved in so many of those scandals, and he worked right underneath them in a lot of ways. And I think a lot of people are calling into question just in terms of him getting reelected, running unopposed. That's something that not a lot of people were big fans of. So his goal is to grow the brand of soccer around the world. He's doing, admittedly, a good job of that. From all of the scandals that were going on, all of the lawsuits, he's been able to replenish the coffers of the soccer, of FIFA, of the Soccer Federation. They now have about $2 billion in excess. So that's something that, going from the real depths of corruption, from lawsuits and all of the officials that needed to be shown the door, and probably more still to come, he's done a good job of replenishing the coffers. But again, he needs to grow in the African nation. He needs to grow in different Asian nations as well, because when you look at soccer and you're looking at trying to grow it on a global scale and reach those 48 teams for the next Men's World Cup, he still has an uphill climb to go.
Well, thank you very much, Mike Bako there, sports editor at DailyNational.com.